my colleague from the NFL Network, NFL Media Group, the great Tom Pelissero. How are you, Tommy P?
Doing fantastic, Rich. What's up to my boys in the studio?
Hey,
Tom.
what's up,
What up,
Tom?
TP?
You're such
happy to be here.
You look great.
You're such a panderer, Tom.
You look great.
We're friends, Rich. That's
Pandering.
ridiculous.
Buddies, we
As long as
text.
the check keeps clearing, I'll keep doing it.
That's our guy. That's not pandering. Come on.
All right.
The audacity.
Down low, Tom.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologize. All right, Tom. The story yesterday that the NFLPA released a list of agents and who they represent of the kids at the combine and coming into the draft did not feature the name Caleb Williams on it. And it appears he is going to enter the combine, at the very least, unrepresented by a league-certified agent. What's your reporting on this, Tom?
I would say, Rich, anybody who had kind of done research on Caleb Williams throughout the fall and knew where his head is at would not have been surprised by that. There was never an intention for him to hire an agent, not for a lack of trying by the agent community. But, Caleb Williams is, I think, in a lot of ways emblematic of the modern college athlete where, remember, he's had NIL deals. He's had, been able to be paid at the college level. He was brought up to be a star quarterback. He's had different people in his life. His dad certainly has been very involved as well. His dad is kind of a disruptor in the business community. And so he has a lot of experience on doing different sorts of things. I don't think that anybody really ever believed Caleb Williams was going to hire an agent. He's not the first quarterback to forgo an agent during the pre-draft process. Lamar Jackson is a recent famous example of it. Certainly, I think that you can make a fair case that there's a lot of different things an agent would do for you besides the contract, which, yes, those are slotted. Those are you're arguing over offset language and bonus structure and things like that might be relatively minor. There's a lot of other value that a good agent can bring you throughout the course of the process. Caleb's opting not to go that direction. He does have other people involved who are very experienced either on the media relations side or on the legal side of things. So it's not as if Caleb Williams is going through this process and he's going to be sitting at the table crunching a 50-page contract here when it comes down to actually doing the deal. He is going to have help, but he's opting not to have an agent, which, again, I don't think should surprise anybody, but it's one of the many nuances of Caleb Williams as an NFL prospect that teams, like anybody else who's doing something different, are going to be sifting through.
So what all right, let me figure this out here. So discard the conversation. Well, he just doesn't want to pay 3% to somebody when he feels he's going to be number one overall, and he's got other people who will help with offset language and things of that nature. When you say disruptor, are you saying essentially he's doing this just to do because it's different? He doesn't want to conform. I kind of don't understand that, Tom.
Well, again, I was referring to his dad being
Right.
sort of a disruptor in the business community. His dad has, for a good chunk of Caleb's life, been, a significant force in terms of, not so much, the teaching of football, but just everything else. It's guiding Caleb's career from Oklahoma to USC and now into the NFL. Again, there's other people that are involved in this process. I think that for Caleb, and again, for a lot of young athletes coming up, they're not the guys coming up from 20 years ago. They're not the ones who lived in a world where if you transferred, you had to sit out, or a world where if you got any money to play the game, it was in an envelope that was glad handed you by a booster after the game. I mean, this is, college football is now pro football. And so guys are coming in with a completely different viewpoint of, well, I operated this way in college. Why would I have to operate differently in the NFL? Then on top of that, the other factor with Caleb Williams is, he's that rare prospect that maybe doesn't need to play the game like some other people. Again, there are plenty of NFL people, and I've got text messages from them, who don't like anything that's different, certainly not with the top prospect, and they're going to have these kind of predisposed opinions about anybody who does not follow the normal process. But, let's be honest, no matter what Caleb Williams says or does in the coming couple of months here, he's probably still going number one. And there's a limited number of teams, even if the Bears were willing to move, that would be able to move up into that spot. So do you need to play ball with every single team? I mean, last year, Bryce Young canceled his visits late in the process. For years, some of the big agencies didn't have their quarterbacks throw at the combine. These are not unusual that certain quarterback prospects do things differently. I think the difference with Caleb is He's been in such a spotlight for so long. He is viewed as one of those, again, opinions vary among different scouts and coaches, but he's viewed as one of those can't miss types of prospects here. There is an intense spotlight on him, and anything he does throughout the course of the process that is not the way that other quarterbacks have done it is going to be picked apart.
Well, then where does maybe trying to influence who chooses him fall into that? Right? Normally that's where an agent might be able to work behind the scenes and try and influence. What if he doesn't want to go to Chicago? Because if you're saying that, you know, the father's a disruptor and he's the one who basically came out and told, he told GQ in September, hey, might be better off in this day and age for a player to go undrafted because he could choose wherever he wants to go. Like the draft is kind of, you know, anti-player in that regard.
And that's an argument you can make too.
Right.
I mean,
so that's the question is what's your tea leaf reading of how Williams is going to approach the draft process based on just the small pieces of information we're trying to pull from right now?
I would say at this point, Rich, and we're 2 months and like 4 days out from the NFL draft, 2 months and 2 days, somewhere around there. There's been no communication from Caleb Williams and his team to clubs that I want to go to X or I'm going to refuse to go to Y. That has not happened. That could still happen throughout the course of the process. Just like any player could try to manipulate the process in that regard. I mean, there's different circumstances through the years of agents, you know, actively trying not to get their clients drafted by certain teams or not get drafted at all because they felt like it was better off if they, you know, didn't end up doing that. But it's normally not the number one pick. You're talking about John Elway. You're talking about Eli Manning. You're talking about a few occasions through history. Caleb Williams quite possibly would have the power to try to engineer something like that. What you're referring to too, Rich, I think is some of the complications when you don't have a certified agent because, you know, you don't want to Ken Francis yourself. If you remember the name
Nice.
Ken Francis,
Yes.
he was
From Lamar,
the inventor of the entire gym, who was also working with Lamar Jackson at various points had reached out to teams trying to get them to make an offer sheet. The NFL sent a memo to all the teams saying, hey, you can't talk to this guy, Ken Francis, the Florida man who invented this gym in a suitcase and is trying to negotiate a $50 million a year deal for Lamar. You can't talk to him. It would be the same thing. Now, your parents are different because remember, Lamar's mom was a big factor in it. So hypothetically, if Caleb wanted his dad to call around to teams, that's more of a gray area, and it's probably permissible. But again, that has not happened at this point. Carl Williams is not operating like that. It doesn't mean that something can't evolve over the next couple of months here. But I would anticipate that Caleb Williams will be in Indianapolis next week, and teams will have an opportunity to have him answer some of those questions himself.
I love, by the way, great use of Ken Francis as a verb. Tom, well done. Tom Pelissero here.
One of my favorite stories in recent years.
It has been something else. Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. The sense of what the Bears are going to do and the timeline here. What's your reporting on that?
I would say all the evidence. I know we've talked about this, Rich, but everything that they've done, all the moves that they've made, have indicated to me that they're preparing to take a quarterback at number one. In all likelihood, that's going to be Caleb Williams. But if you're the Bears, and you guys just mentioned, you know, March 10th was when the trade happened last year, trading number one pick to Carolina so they could take Bryce Young. I would think Chicago wants to have a pretty good plan in place prior to the start of free agency, because if you're thinking we want to make, as our friend Ian Rappaport put it on Super Bowl Sunday, a historic type of an offer, you want to know that and have everything on the table prior to the start of free agency. That's what Ryan Poles has done in the past. He talked about that after the trade involving Bryce Young, or the number one pick. He wanted to, you know, have the answers in advance. So I would think that you, again, want to have the answers to the test. You are going to, with, you know, Justin Fields, again, if you wait to trade Justin Fields until closer to the draft, some of those teams that we've talked about being logical fits for Justin Fields may have pivoted and gone another direction. It's the same teams that are involved or potentially involved on all these quarterbacks. Everybody's going to circle Atlanta on their list. You know, depending what Washington wants to do with the number two pick, they're a team that could pop up here. I keep seeing Pittsburgh brought up. I personally find that hard to believe, Rich, that they're going to go out and sign Kirk Cousins for $50 million a year or trade for Russell Wilson. They do want to get a, you know, competent and a good number two backup plan. But everything that I've understood about the Steelers' approach here is they want to give Kenny Pickett a real opportunity with a different offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, to go out there and show that he's, worthy of being the first-round pick that he was. So you could sign, let's say, Ryan Tannehill, who's got a relationship with Arthur Smith, and I would certainly anticipate Arthur would like to get Tannehill in there to help Kenny Pickett learn as much as anything, but also give himself a backup option. You can do that at a way more economical level than making a trade for these other things. But again, to the point of what teams are involved on quarterbacks, it is Atlanta, it's Washington, it's Pittsburgh. What do the Giants do? They've got Daniel Jones. They're fully locked into that for, I believe, $35 million again this year. But could they be in the market to draft one, to sign one, whatever? Denver needs a quarterback answer. Minnesota needs a quarterback answer. You can go right down the list. Tampa hasn't wrapped things up with Baker Mayfield yet, and he potentially could have a market elsewhere. All those teams, the moment that you start crossing them off because they signed a guy or they traded for somebody else or they draft a guy, you lose your leverage to potentially get the maximum value that you can get for Justin Fields. So all of which is a long way of saying, Rich, I would anticipate what the Bears are going to do over the next week here is gather all the information that they can. They're going to be able to interface not just with agents of other quarterbacks, but also with, the other teams who potentially would be involved. I would think, I don't know, but I would think that there are probably some face-to-face meetings in which they'll find out what exactly you would be able to get in a Justin Fields trade or in a trade for the number one pick. They then can reset at the end of the combine. Teams that get back from that on March 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there on that Sunday, Monday. The franchise tag deadline for applying it's March 5th. Right around there is where, okay, we've got all the information now. We probably have a good idea what direction. And again, my belief, based on reading the tea leaves, nothing final, I believe that is them using the number one pick and probably taking Caleb Williams. But you gather all the information possible, you take a step back and you go, okay, are we still all on the same page? If you are, then you proceed, and you probably are seeing if you can get the type of value you want for Justin Fields and moving on from him.
So you're saying before the new league year, which is the 13th, the window to negotiate is the 11th. So right there, that's where we're going to probably get.
That's where all the, if you go back over the last couple of years, Rich, and look at the trades, 2 years ago was when we had that ridiculous run of trades where it was, going off the top of my head here, but it was Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, Devontae Adams got traded.
Tyreek Hill.
During that week, Khalil Mack got traded.
Tyreek.
It was an unbelievable run. And all those things happened, I want to say, between like March 5th and March 15th, somewhere in there.
We call that the hell going on week here on the Rich Eisen Show. The hell going on month. Because it finished with Bobby Wagner winding up with the Rams. That March was insane.
It was an unbelievable run, but that's really where a lot of these trades have happened. You obviously then always have those aftershock trades that occur draft week, but really if you don't trade somebody by, if not March 13th, but at least by the weekend, because you got a bunch of guys who have either 30 or 50 year roster bonuses, so you're talking end of day March 14th, end of day March 16th. Some of those might take place there, but if you get past that week, there's usually not a lot of trades until you get closer to the draft, because then everybody kind of takes that step back. Okay, who are the guys that are still sitting out there? They didn't get signed. They didn't get traded for. What would that take? All right, let's assess that now against, everyone's going through pro days. All right, let's look at all this. Let's gather more information, reset after pro days, and that's in April where sometimes you have those aftershock trades.
Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what do you think the Broncos' plans are at quarterback?
What I would tell you, Rich, is all options are on the table for the Broncos at quarterback. And I still, as I told you on game day morning at the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, I still can't rule out the possibility that the Broncos take one more swing next week at Indianapolis at trying to get Russell Wilson to tweak his contract. As hard as it is to believe that Russell Wilson could play another down for Sean Payton and the Broncos, listen, Russell Wilson's agent, Mark Rogers, who only has one client, it's Russell Wilson. He's only really done big deals for Russell Wilson. This will be the first time that he's involved in anything like talking to other teams. Obviously there was Russell Wilson trade rumors for years, but this is the first time that you've got a guy who's not on top, that's not just commanding a monster contract. I would think that Mark Rogers, through the course of next week, will get a pretty good handle on what the market might be. The Broncos will have a pretty good handle on what the market might be if they go a different direction here. And maybe if everybody looks on the other side of the fence and doesn't like what they see, the best scenario could be Russell Wilson back in a Denver uniform. Again, I don't believe that that is a likely outcome, especially with everything that happened from the Broncos making what they perceived to be a good faith effort to get Russell Wilson, not to give up money, not to give up guarantees, but to push back the vesting date so that it would lock him in as their quarterback for 2024, but give them the flexibility in 2025 to get out of it. Instead, Mark Rogers ran to the players union, said they're trying to take away his money. It became this, massive issue that then they pushed publicly, saying he got benched for money, and they're leaking narratives and leaking documents and all this other stuff. Hard to believe that you come back from that. But listen, Rich, anything's possible in the NFL. Having said that, I know that the track record on Sean Payton is he really has not played with a rookie quarterback a whole lot. Doesn't mean he wouldn't this year, but I believe the only time he's done that in 15, 16 years as a head coach was when everybody got COVID and they had to roll out Ian Book for a game in December with the Saints several years ago. That's really it. He's always wanted to have a veteran. I would fully anticipate that they're looking at everything. Jarrett Stidham's the guy they got in-house. They've got him on an economical deal. Sean Payton has said before he thinks that Stidham can be a starting quarterback in the league. But I would think that they're going to look at all these free agent quarterbacks. I wouldn't even rule out the possibility that the Broncos would make a run at Kirk Cousins. It'll depend on the number. And you can certainly look at the numbers on paper and say, how in the world are they going to get this done? They owe Russell Wilson $39 million, whether he's on the team or not. But again, Sean Payton is going to want somebody. Sean Payton believes, he said it before last season, he believed this was a playoff team. That was overshadowed in the same USA Today interview by some other stuff Sean said. But part of what he said was, yeah, this team should be a playoff team right now. He's going to have the same mentality this year. They're going to be aggressive. Everything that he's ever known about team building is you're willing to move those chips forward. You're willing to take your run right now. If he believes Kirk Cousins gives him the best chance to compete in a really, really tough division that now has your guy Jim Harbaugh in it too, Rich, I wouldn't take anything off the table. They're going to do their research on all this stuff, and that includes, again, the possibility that Russell Wilson could end up hanging around since they're paying him anyway.
Before I send you to the weekend, Tom Pelissero, give me some names of who might shock us that they turn into a cap casualty over the next couple weeks, and they're going to be available when it's free agency time.
I don't know that there's any real shocks in terms of, the cap casualties. There's a bunch of the running backs that need to get things, figured out. We know how much the Packers value Aaron Jones, but, he took a haircut last year. He's probably going to have to take a haircut again this year. Joe Mixon took a 2-year haircut last year, so I wouldn't think there's anything there. What happens with the Browns and Nick Chubb? He's coming off of a devastating injury. Their options may well be limited, but they're going to have to figure out what their plan is at the running back position. There's a bunch of the wide receivers that I think are going to be really interesting. I mean, I'll give you the team to watch, Rich.
Sure.
Is the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz coming in. It's a new regime. And no matter who is taking over, you're going to have surgery to do on that roster because they had a handful of guys who ate up like 85% of their salary cap last year. So you've got Joey Bosa, who's barely played in 2 years because he's had so many injuries. You got Khalil Mack, who had like 17 sacks last year. Everybody missed it because the Chargers weren't very good. Khalil Mack had an unbelievable year. He's still young enough that if they choose to trade him, there'd be value there. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Derwin James has a huge number. By the way, Austin Eckler is a free agent. The Chargers are a team that, whether it's trades, whether it's cuts, they're going to have to do a lot of different things. Again, Jim Harbaugh is another guy who he's not coming in thinking, okay, let's tear it down and we'll slowly build. He's going for Super Bowl right now, but they're going to have to make some decisions here because they've got some other spots in their roster that they need to fortify. And if they can turn one or two of those veteran players into picks or additional assets, I think that they are going to be fully exploring that.
What's your best guess? All right, I got a minute for you if you're on this about Saquon. What's your best guess in 90 seconds? What do you have?
It's a great question on Saquon because, Rich, remember, they took an initial run back at the bye week in 2022 at getting a deal done with Saquon. They offered him a significant deal prior to the franchise tag deadline last March. And their plan, based on their actions, was get the deal done with Saquon somewhere in that $12, $13 million per year range, and then franchise tag Daniel Jones. Instead, Saquon shocked, I think, everybody by turning that deal down, thinking he should be at the McCaffrey number. The Giants then have to pivot, tag Saquon, sign Daniel Jones. They still made another run at Saquon in July before the franchise tag deadline, albeit at a lower number than they were offering him in March, because now they had him for $10.1 million, and they had him a bargain on the tag. All of which is to say, the Giants clearly value Saquon Barkley. I find it hard to believe that he's going to play this year on the tag. I do believe that there will be a effort made on the Giants' part to see if they can get a deal done with Saquon. But at some point with some of these guys, you might want him to get out a little bit closer to the market, see what their value is. I wouldn't remove the possibility of another tag Rich on Saquon just to buy the Giants a little bit more time here. But there also might be some value in him going out there. We know he said he wants to be a Giant for life. We know John Mara and Giants Brass wants him to be a Giant. Let's see. Can he do way better elsewhere? Does Jim Harbaugh go out and think, I got to have a top-level run game? I'll offer him $15 million a year? Maybe that happens. I do believe the Giants will try to get a deal done. Will that actually happen prior to March 5th or March 11th or March 13th? We'll see.
Tom, you're the best. Have a great weekend. We'll see you in Indy, okay?
Glad to be here, Rich. Sounds good.
You bet. That's Tom Pelissero right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.